This is the first video in section 5.1 where we're going to be looking at the extract, transform, and load process as an overview. So let's take a look at our roadmap to make sure we sort of know where we are. And in this next three videos, we're going to be looking at the ETL process. We're going to look at what happens when you take a relational database. In this case, we're going to look at AdventureWorks, put it through an ETL, and the result you get is something called AdventureWorks DW. So we're going to be looking and driving down into what makes up a relational database, and also what the inside of a data warehouse actually looks like at the end of that process. So let's expand this, and we're going to talk about AdventureWorks and AdventureWorks Data Warehouse. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the instance I've installed of SQL Server 2008 Release 2 here, and it's under the Start. I'll scroll down, go to the Release 2, and I'm going to look at something. I'm going to use something called SQL Server Management Studio. You have access to this as well, and you can bring it up and take a look at and follow along with me in another window in your browser if you'd like, and as part of this iLab. And in fact, you can pause the video at times and explore further if there's concepts that you think might be more interesting to you, and you want to dive down and take a closer look or look at additional examples. First thing that's going to happen is it's going to ask me to authenticate, and I'll just connect as my Windows authentication here, and it's going to bring up this instance, and it's going to show me the contents of what's inside this relational database. As I've indicated earlier, actually this is going to be a collection of databases, and we are going to take a look at the AdventureWorks. In this case, it's called AdventureWorks 2008 R2, and AdventureWorks, that's a database, AdventureWorks Data Warehouse 2008 Release 2. And also there's a database that's been predefined for me with my D number 500 for my course number, and I'm going to use it to actually create a data warehouse, or probably what would be more likely called a data mart, since it's going to be a fairly straightforward application here. So let's take a look at just the plain sort of relational database. And in a prior video, I indicated that you can conceptualize a relational database is a collection of tables. So if we were to open up the tables that are here in AdventureWorks, this is a database about collecting information about the activities of a bicycle manufacturing company. And the way this has sort of been broken down, if you scan down the titles of these individual tables, you can see there's a section on human resources, a section on persons and information about different kinds of persons, customers, employees, etc. A section on production. If we scroll down a little bit further, there is also a section down here on purchasing, sales to the resellers, and sales online, if you take a close look here as well. So, and that's sort of the database. So it's sales, production, and HR, with persons being either resellers or employees in addition. Okay, so let's take a particular table, and let's look at, say, for example, a production of product here. If I open it up, it gives me the columns. It will show me the individual columns that are in the table. So here is a listing of the columns. So if you run down, you can you can see things that you'd think might be in a product description, like color, the safety stock, the reorder point, the standard cost, the list price, and all kinds of information. A critical piece right here, if you look at this, there's a little golden key, and that's to indicate that this is a product ID. It's called the primary key. So this is what gives each row in this table a unique identity, and it's used a lot in here. So in the relational database. So let's take a look at an actual set of data here. So I'm going to just run this and select the top 1,000 rows. It cranks a little while, and then over here, if you take a look, there is two sections. On the right hand side. This is called a SQL query. SQL stands for Structured Query Language, and this is what the actual language itself that we use to, either define tables, define columns, pull information out of columns like this does with this select, and actually update, delete, and create new rows and tables as well. So if I scroll down, you can see that this specifies the columns at once and the top 1,000 rows from this particular database and this particular table in here as well. Below is the actual results. So these are actual rows in the database. If I scan down, I can see, for example, taking this particular row, the product ID is 316. There's something called the blade, and if I scroll across, all sorts of information available in terms of this particular thing. So there's real data here, and sometimes there's empty columns, and sometimes they contain information. It just varies as we scroll across. So you can bring it up in your own instance, and you might want to explore some of these other tables. I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing this because there's all sorts of tables. What I also want to do is I want to show you about, I said there was a collection of tables, which this certainly is, and there's a data that obviously goes inside each of these tables, but I also said there's a collection of relationships that are kind of important to the structure of this database. So I'm going to right click on this again, and I'm going to do what I want is I want to do a diagram. Okay, I want to do a diagram of the relationships this table has with other tables in this. I come up to database diagrams up here, and I right click on it. I want to do a new database diagram, and it cranks a little bit and says, okay, which table do I want? And so I wanted the production.product table, so I'll scroll down a little bit, and there is the product table that I want. So I add that into the diagram, and it basically, if you look at it, it adds this to the right hand side, and these are the columns in this particular table. So if I close this guy here and I right click on this, I can look at it in different kinds of ways, but also I can look at the relationships that are added. So I can add related tables to it by clicking here, and you can see there is a number of tables that are actually related to this particular one, because it's a pretty important table in the database itself. It'll take a couple of minutes to actually fully load all these various relationships. But what this means is each of these other tables, subsidiary tables underneath here that are related to either to this guy or to them, they contain information that are relevant to the data in these tables. So it can be a fairly complicated database diagram that you can be generating here, but it's an important thing to know what's related to what, because that's going to define how you extract information out of a relational database table. If you're trying to get information from two tables and they're not related, it becomes virtually impossible to reliably and efficiently do something like that. Okay, so I can let's scale this down just a little bit so I can see sort of the general outlines of this, and I can move this around a little bit and to try to make this a little more visible. You can see where all these all these tables are related, and they're actually related again by virtue of the primary keys, and they're actually foreign keys inside this. Now, this is not a course on SQL, but you just generally have to know that there are actual relationships that are predefined that connect these tables together. So if I'm looking at a particular row in a product table, I can actually go out and pull information from other tables using a column in here called a foreign key that maps into into one of these particular tables and pull information out specific to that particular row. And that's going to be kind of an important concept later on when we take a look at the AdventureWorks data warehouse. So you can, again, I'd encourage you to pause the video, to look around here. You can't hurt it. The rights you've been given to this prohibit you from actually changing anything, and you can take a look and navigate and see all sorts of very interesting activity going on here. Now, if we go to the data warehouse database, let's see what happens. Again, going back to our map. Okay, we've just looked at AdventureWorks. Now what's happened is Microsoft has taken this database AdventureWorks and probably some other data sets as well, and gone through an ETL process. And the results of that process has been something called AdventureWorks Data Warehouse here, which is, as it turns out, is also a relational database. So let's close this just to make sure that it's not sort of confusing here. No, we don't want to change, don't want to save, say no, and go ahead and close this SQL query where we looked. And we come down here to the data warehouse itself, and you can see a very similar set of structure here that we saw in AdventureWorks, because it is, as I said earlier, oops, this is the wrong one, that's the empty one. So let me get the actual data warehouse one here, and it's the same structure as we saw in AdventureWorks. If you look at the tables, though, there's something remarkable. If you start looking at these tables sort of carefully, the names of them here, you see dim, and then all of a sudden you see fact here. And what this is basically, as it turns out, a data warehouse is a collection of tables, but it particularly is generally a collection of two very different kinds of tables that we're going to be looking at. One kind of table is something called dimensions, and that's a very important set of tables that describe the specific sort of ways we're going to be able to look at the information in our fact tables. Our fact tables provide us information about the specific things that are going on that we can aggregate. So let's take a look at, say, a fact table for finance as an example, and let's take a look at the columns in it. And you can see that there's a finance key, and there is some specific sort of nothing much but actual foreign keys that connect to other tables here that provide us dimensions. These are all dimension. You're going to find that these are all dimension tables, except for amount. And so there's an amount here that we're going to aggregate on, and we're going to be able to aggregate it based on these particular dimension tables that we have here. So let's go back up here and let's do a diagram. Okay, let's do a new database diagram. And I want to do the fact finance table. So I'm going to scroll down, get to fact finance, say add. It comes up. That's the only one I want to look at for right now, and it shows me the same columns that I have below here. I right click on it, and I want to add the related tables. And they're loading some of these tables now, and these are related to the dimensions that we have before. And it turns out this is a pretty important concept that we have. Let's spend a couple of minutes here sort of taking a look at the structure of this in kind of a general way. If I bring up fact here, I've paused the video on you, and I don't want to bore you with it, but I basically rearranged that pile of tables to make it look like where the fact table is in the center here, and these are the various dimensions that we have around the fact table. So these dimensions are ways we can slice and dice information about financial amounts and in our data warehouse. And if we don't have a particular dimension already predefined, we can't slice on that particular fact dimension rather. So dates we can look at, departments we can look at, groups. The account itself we can slice and dice on, organizations and scenarios. But anything else we might want to do has to be defined as a dimension if we're going to be able to answer questions about it. And we'll look at this in general, but just keep in mind this is the way it's actually structured inside a data warehouse, and this is called a star schema. The idea being you can have to use your imagination quite a bit here. This is the center part of the star, and there are actual dimensions, and I'll show you a little bit better and simpler example a little bit later. But these are actual, the points of a star coming off of here. Each one represents a particular dimension. So again, you can go back and take the time, if you wish, pause this video and pull up a fact table and construct your own and see what the various star schemas look like inside this particular data warehouse. So that's going to be it pretty much for this particular video. We basically looked at AdventureWorks and taken a look inside, and then we've looked at the results of processing AdventureWorks through an ETL and what happens, and talked a little bit about the collection of dimensions and fact tables and how they might be structured in terms of star schemas here. In the next video, we're going to dive down a little more detail about how you construct dimensions and fact tables and what you need to be looking at specifically from a business context as well.